Welcome to Second Take, the show that takes a look at the issues behind the news. 2025 started with a whimper in the real economy, with the announcement that ArcelorMittal South Africa would shut its Longs division. Terence Creamer joins me to discuss prospects for saving the unit. Hi, Terence.
Hi, Chanel.
The announcement, while shocking, is not surprising.
No, it's not, because this announcement was made initially back in November 2023, when ArcelorMittal announced that it would be closing its Longs business. Then there was a lot of interventions. There was a task team set up, high level, by the previous administration before the elections. And there was a period where it looked like ArcelorMittal and the government were getting to a point where ArcelorMittal was making progress. They had listed a whole lot of issues that they felt had needed to be dealt with for them to sustain the operation, particularly Newcastle. That's where it's centred. And it is devastating for Newcastle. This is everyone, just about every business or person in some way is linked to the steel business in Newcastle if you're in that northern KwaZulu-Natal town. So there were things like around the rail reliability tariffs that we know is a chronic problem, electricity supply and tariffs, which we know is a chronic problem. That affects just about all businesses in South Africa, not uniquely ArcelorMittal, but given the geographical isolation of Newcastle from its iron ore resource in particular, the rail had to be sorted out. There were some signs of progress, but the real issue was its lack of competitiveness. One, from an import perspective, but more really against a rise of a number of mini mills that were making long steel products. Not all the grades that ArcelorMittal makes. In fact, quite a narrow portion of those grades, but still making it far more cheaply. And really that was because of a policy intervention made around scrap metal that has really offered these mini mills an advantage in terms of material costs. So they're getting a scrap discount of about 30% is what is required. And then if there's additional scrap that's available for export, they need to pay a 10% export tariff. So it's helped improve the competitiveness of these operations despite the rising electricity costs, etc. And that has been difficult because the costs of production of these mills are well below that of Newcastle, and the prices have sort of come down to almost somewhat match that cost of production. So as a policy intervention, it somewhat worked in terms of lowering the cost, but it's put pressure on this integrated operation, Newcastle. So there was toing and froing around that, but when there was no resolution in December, there was a decision made that they would again close that business.
What options are available to government to salvage the business?
Well, you can be on the margins, as I say, the improvement around rail, electricity, there are these negotiated pricing agreements that a number of companies have got. They're very controversial, but they are sustaining a number of operations. If the rail operation improved, I think that would be helpful. I think ArcelorMittal has been fairly nimble in actually using the collapse of Transnet freight rail and the pent-up supply in iron ore to sign into some quite good iron ore prices, but it hasn't been enough to offset the other issues. But the real big domestic lever relates to the scrap policy and whether government's prepared to budge on that.
Itac is reviewing both the scrap metal benefit and the overall steel tariff structure.
Yeah, so the administration of this, it's a controversial policy, so there's been a number of people have raised the issues, not just ArcelorMittal around it, the recycling community. The scrap owners have been somewhat quieter, interestingly, because they're the ones that are getting a lower price. But, the recycling community and the ArcelorMittal have raised this as a major issue. So it has been under review by Itac for some time. There's been an initial report, and there should be some sort of finality on that, on how that is going to be administered going forward in the next few months, but not in time for ArcelorMittal, unless these current negotiations underway between government and ArcelorMittal to try and salvage the business, that is accelerated. But work has been done on that, but there doesn't seem to be an intention to get away from it. When ArcelorMittal applied for and got trade protection, mostly for its flat business, not its long business, a number of years ago when it was in serious distress. This was part of the quid pro quo, okay, we're going to then try get competition into part of this business, specifically the long business. And the way we're going to do it is give people a scrap material advantage price benefit. And that it wasn't very effective initially, and then changes were made in the administration of it, which made it quite effective. So the mini mills are enjoying this big discount on scrap and have become competitive. And we've seen, by all accounts, a drop in domestic prices below to a point where Newcastle can compete. So it's a big policy decision for government. The other thing is that there's been a lot of investment from a state-owned enterprise in the form of, or a state-owned bank in the form of the IDC, that's invested a lot in these electric arc furnace operations. So there's a lot of money on the line. If that scrap benefit gets taken away, are those investments as sound? So there's a number of balls here in the air. So it's not an easy decision to move away from the scrap policy. But there's also a separate, far bigger review. It's actually the biggest review we've ever seen of a sort of a section of the tariff book that's underway by Itac, and we haven't seen the Gazette notice yet. That's going to be published soon about how this review is going to be unfold. It's going to look at the full value chain in steel, look at where we are producing, where maybe there are competitive pressures that can be alleviated somewhat through protection or other policy measures, such as quotas, etc. So there is that underway, as well as where we shouldn't be protecting in that value chain, where we should open it up. So that is underway. That's a big review, and it won't, I don't think, be completed this year. So there's an understanding that this is a big issue. The problem is this chronic oversupply, overhang of China in the steel market in a number of things. So products are coming in potentially very much cheaper, and then amplified by chronically weak demand in South Africa. For many years now, we've just been seeing steel demand fall continuously. It has its ups and downs, but generally the trend has been downward. And without serious domestic demand, and then maybe leveraging the infrastructure program through preferential procurement sort of policies, designation of local steel, without that demand, it's very, very tricky to get out of this. So there are these reviews. Whether they're going to be enough to convince ArcelorMittal to change direction, it's far from clear.
What do you think is the most likely scenario?
Well, there's no doubt it's a political hot potato, as it was this time last year. So there's a lot of effort going in. So there's discussions, direct discussions. There were discussions at Davos with the ultimate owner, the Indian owner of ArcelorMittal, at a high level. So there's definitely political pressure. But, ArcelorMittal has to look at its business and say, can we sustain this loss-making entity, which is really draining the business? And is there an opportunity maybe to grow other parts of the business, especially in the flats value chain? And I think that's what they're basically saying. They're seeing a lot more opportunity there. So it's going to take a lot of convincing. Whether government's going to prepare to make a major policy U-turn on scrap and on the electric arc furnaces with the risk and exposure that the IDC's own balance sheet has to that entity is also a big question. So I think it's politically hot. We can see political parties are rallying around this. So you never know. But I think fundamentally, unless the demand situation changes massively and this domestic lever is used around scrap, which is, as I say, it would be a major U-turn, I can't see ArcelorMittal making the U-turn that it made this time last year.
Thank you. That's the second Take Show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis. Also, don't forget to listen to the audio version of our Engineering News Daily email newsletter.